So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the mods I've done to my Eflite F-15, the 64 millimeter EDF jet. It's a really cool plane. So far, it's been my favorite plane I think I've ever owned. I've got a couple other Eflite models. The UMX Turbo Timber I also would highly recommend for FPV flight. But for this one, I had some trouble landing it. It retains its speed really well, and it makes it difficult to land it at parks or other smallish locations with a lot of trees around, where you might feel comfortable flying FPV or even not FPV, just line of sight, but landing it is really difficult. So the nature of these jets, I think that this is my first EDF jet, but I think that's kind of the nature of the jets. It's basically just a wing with not a huge amount of lift that helps it, so you have to maintain a high speed to keep it going. So anyway, I've wired up some flaps, and I've also wired up some rudder to help whenever I land. I don't use the rudder a whole lot, but the flaps I use every time I fly. I use the rudder a little bit. It's helpful, but the flaps definitely is a game changer. I put a Y connector up here for the dual servos that manage the rudders, and I put a Y connector in here for the rudder on the control board that so that the rudder is split between the front wheel and the actual dual rudder. For the flaps, I've just got a couple little servos mounted in there, and both the wires I cut them into the foam with the razor and ran them through this thing that covers the ESC. You'll notice the ESC is all beat up. I had a problem with this plane, and I don't know if it got overloaded with all the servos or if I wingtip stalled it. I'm not too sure. So what I did was I kind of crashed it into a lake, and when I did, I burnt up the 40 amp ESC that came in it. So when I burnt up the ESC, I thought, just to be sure that I don't have any more problems like this in case it did get overloaded, I'll go ahead and put a 60 amp ESC in it. So that's what I did, and it doesn't really fit. So to make it fit, I kind of just duct taped everything together, and it works out fine. It gives a little extra weight. So to balance out the weight, I added a screw in the back, a hook, so that I can hang my plane from the wall without damaging the rudders or damaging any of the tail surfaces. So now it'll hang up real nice. I put a little bit of silicone glue in there to hold it in. For the FPV system, I've got a Foxier. Actually, I don't remember the model, but it's a pretty basic FPV system. It's not real expensive. It was probably 80 or 90 bucks. It's an 800 milliwatt transmitter, and let's see. Here's my setup for my control. I replaced the stock antenna with a 9 dB antenna I got off Amazon, and I put a different connector in here. You can watch videos on eBay on YouTube about that, about how to do that. Also, I'm mentioned on the flaps. I didn't have to add any elevator compensation for the flaps. On some planes I've had to, but on this one it flies perfectly straight with full flaps. And look at the throw on that. That's some serious flap throw. You'll see later in the video that the flaps slow this thing down so well. I almost did like a dive bomb in the parking lot earlier when I flew it to do the landing. And the flaps just are remarkable for this thing. So if you're going to do a mod, do that. My headset is a Beta FPV $55 deal with a couple of really nice antennas. I think the antennas were almost as much as the headset, actually. And I twisted them down so tight that it actually stripped off the housing of the antennas. And I don't know if I damaged anything or not, but this was a starter headset for me. The antennas I plan on keeping. I'll use with my next headset if I ever get another one. And it does pretty well. I think At first, I thought I would have a little trouble focusing on the image in there with the way that it's set up. I have a bunch of different, like, I've been using Oculus Rift for a long time, and I don't have any problem with focusing on the Rift. But for this, at first it was a little tough, but now it's fine. I'm not going to review any of this stuff. I just wanted to tell what I do. I had a couple losses of power with this transmitter before I did the antenna, or where the airplane would seem to lose connection and just fly straight. And when it does that and you can't control it, that's a loss of power. That's a loss of signal. So if you have ever been flying your plane, it loses signal and it just flies straight, that's the safe system kicking in on your Eflite airplane that takes over to keep it from just nosing into the ground and crashing. When I set this up, I think the flaps were already unlocked and the gear was unlocked too. I'm not using the gear channel on the board, but I'm pretty sure both of those are unlocked on this receiver. So you don't have to get the Spectrum cable and do any kind of unlocking with that, although I did get it. So you should be able to just plug and play on the servos. And that's the basic gist of all the stuff I've done to my plane. I'll show you the video of it flying now. I also wanted to show real quick the way I have it wired up to the battery. I have a 4S connector. I cut the middle leads off that go to the individual cells for the middle two. And I just ran this cable that I soldered a servo end on. And for the camera part, the camera has a couple little solders that you would do to hook up your camera and your receiver or your transmitter. And then I hooked a servo end on that for power so that I can power it like that. And then this can still go to my battery in my F-15. I use a 4S. Don't ever try and use a 3S with this airplane. You can do it. It's not like it's going to crash and fall out of the sky, but with a FPV system this heavy mounted on it, it might. Also, I did this FPV system so that I can put it on any of my airplanes. I just use a strap, a Velcro strap with some rubber on one side. This rubber strap right here. And I can put it on any of my big airplanes. So it's a nice modular system. There's a couple people out there who talk about this. It's a piece of PVC that I bent up using a heat gun and just mounted the camera on it with some hot glue and small zip ties, and then I mounted the transmitter on it as well, the same way, hot glue and zip ties. So yeah, always use a 4S with this airplane. That's my opinion.